Goalie for tonight?
Goalie.
Any lineup changes mentioned?
No.
When it comes to Owen Tippett, I know there's been, watching his offensive game for consistency, and his offensive game when he's on uses so much energy. I wonder what consistency looks like to you for him, because he certainly can't drive the net every time he's got the puck. But I'm sure there's other things there you're looking for.
Well, I think he's the full package, quite honestly, when he's on. He makes a great seam pass on the power play the other night to TK. Obviously, his skating, he creates so much on his own. One of the few players, a lot of players can't do it on their own. He is, I think that's one of his biggest strengths. If you're asking me for the full package, I still think he has room to grow in the other side of the puck. He gets there to check. I think he understands the positioning. He just doesn't stay. He doesn't stay in the area. It's not a. Sometimes it needs to be a stop and start game. Sometimes he needs to stop. He's always on the go. Sometimes he needs to stop, and I think that'll help him in that part of the game. But I'm not going to nitpick him, because I'm not going to turn him into a guy that's totally thinking about that, because he's way too valuable in the other part of it. And I still think there's so much more to him offensively that I think we're going to see here eventually.
He's been physical, it seems like, lately, too. Like, you've seen him kind of run guys over into the wall. I mean,
Helps his game.
Yeah.
It helps his game. We've talked about that, and I don't want him overthinking that. There was a time during the season where he was struggling, and I felt he was concentrating too much on the hitting. But he's a willing kid. He's not a kid that's going to fight or get involved, but he's a hard to play against and intimidating to play against, just with the tools that he has.
Do you like having these long road trips like this? Is it at a good time maybe of the season to have these kind of long trips with everybody?
I don't know. Everybody always talks about getting the guys together, and I just don't think about it too much. It's on our schedule. I don't do much digging into what. I don't believe in all that stuff as far as the stuff after the game and creating a bond with your team. I think you create a bond with your team by some of the experiences you go through during games. I think that's the most important time in creating bonds, and so it's our schedule. I think the guys have had a good time. Biggest concentration is trying to win games.
What's kind of the process when you have, multiple time zones, multiple climates, multiple different style of games you're playing against? Like, how do you kind of balance everything in terms of the day-to-day, in terms of the process, in terms of how you coach?
We don't get too much involved in how other teams style of play, because I think it's overrated when there's conversations on that. The game isn't that complicated. There are not many huge changes to games, Eastern, Western Conference and all that. We know who we're playing against. We are always concentrating on our team and how we're playing. The time zones, it's a different story for me as far as the scheduling, as far as practice, when we leave, do we stay over, all that stuff comes into play. So that has been given some thought. Brian and I go through it during the year, during the off season, to nail that down. So that is certainly a big part of when you get on these trips, just making sure we're treating the players and trying to get them as much rest as we can.
It's got to be better than that one-on, one-off, and you're flying in and out of games.
That wore us out.
That's
hard. I think some people think that's an easier way to do it. That wore us down, and these trips here, Brian and I go through it with a fine-tooth comb as far as buses. If we're practicing, we knew we weren't going to be practicing much during this trip, and it's important with all the time zones that we're going through.
I've talked to a couple people, and they say that first home game, when you come back from a West Coast trip, is always the hardest. Does it almost make it a little easier that you're playing in Toronto when you come back to the East Coast versus being at home at Wells Fargo?
Yeah, well, it's not so much the East Coast or home. I wish we had one. You always want to try to come back into the middle of the states, into Central Time, and try to work your way back there. we're still going back east, but we have 2 days. Like, we leave tomorrow, and then we have a practice day the next day. The one earlier this year, I think it was at the beginning of the year, we came home, we played. But that's the schedule we were fed. That's the schedule teams like us get. So we don't complain about it. We just got to try to deal with it. So when you get into this type of scheduling, it's not so much, of course we're thinking about while we're doing it, but it's what you do before and what you're doing after, I think is important in these type of schedules when you're going through some time zones. So it's certainly thought out and have discussions on it.